FBI is threatening to steal his thunder. The memo by Republican Congressman Devin Nunes, the Intel Committee chairman who also is on the Trump transition team, is now inside the Trump White House, we have learned. The president has 5 days to decide whether to release it. Some Republicans say the public needs to know for the sake of transparency, but the Justice Department is warning against it. And Democrats say it's all an attempt by the president and his GOP allies to torpedo Robert Mueller's investigation into Russian election meddling and possible collusion with the Trump campaign. By the way, the administration has declined to impose sanctions on Russia. We're going to have much more on that later. Now, right now, I want to go to CNN's Caitlin Collins. She is live for us at the White House. Caitlin, there's so much to discuss here. I want to start with the memo. What are you hearing about the release of it?
Well, Brianna, we're told that the president is very likely to want to release that memo. We know that it was brought over to the White House last night after the House Intelligence Committee voted on it. And though it's unclear if the president has even laid eyes on the memo yet, we are told by a source familiar with his thinking that the president is very likely to release it. It's very interesting because we know that we found out last week that when the president was on Air Force One, he learned of Justice Department efforts to quash the release of that memo, that he erupted in anger. So this is certainly a thinking that has been his for some time now, not just since the memo was brought over to the White House last night, but he is very likely to advocate for the release of this memo, Brianna.
And is there any indication that he's going to address Russia at all in his State of the Union tonight?
No, there's not. We actually have a White House official telling my colleague Jeff Zeleny that the president is not going to bring up Russia tonight. He's not slated to, because they said that's not what tonight is about. Now, of course, this is a president who makes decisions on his own whims. He may decide to bring it up if he feels that it's necessary, but we'll likely see him stick with the teleprompter. But it's interesting, Brianna, because overall the president's message tonight is going to be about his successes here in Washington, when really this whole speech is going to be overshadowed to some extent by the new developments in this Russia investigation. And though he's going to be painting a picture of success here in Washington, this comes after many developments in recent days that show anything but, with the deputy FBI director abruptly resigning yesterday. The government is a week away from running out of funding. There's no agreement on what to do with immigration. So certainly an interesting backdrop as the president addresses the Capitol here tonight.
Certainly is, to say the least. Caitlin Collins at the White House, thank you. And now to the political battle over the mysterious, partisan, and controversial memo. House Speaker Paul Ryan this morning defending the Republican memo and saying it should be released. Mani Raju is live for us on Capitol Hill. So, Mani, the Speaker just held a press conference. Tell us what he said.
Yeah, that's right. He said that there were legitimate questions that were raised in this memo, suggesting that there may have been some American civil liberties that were violated. He said that the reason they want this out there is to determine whether or not any rules or laws were broken, and to look at possible malfeasance at the Justice Department and the FBI. And one thing that he did do also, Brianna, is defend the decision by the Republicans to release the Nunes memo, the Republican memo, but not release a separate memo, a Democratic memo drafted by the top Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff. Instead, the committee agreed to vote to allow the full House classified access to this memo, but not agree to release it at the same time as the Devin Nunes memo. Now, during the press conference, I pressed them to understand exactly why they made that decision and why they didn't hold back and release both memos at the same time, to give the American public both sides of the argument. This is what Ryan said.
This memo that we just got popped on us yesterday is now going through that process. And I would just tell you, unlike the Democrats on the Intelligence Committee who voted to deny access to this memo to the broader members, Republicans supported doing so. And so now, Devin actually made the motion. So now it will go through that 11G process just like this other memo did.
Why not hold back?
Let me just say a few things.
Back and release at the same time.
What's that? Yeah, as Kevin was mentioning, the chairman went to the FBI to go through the memo to make sure that we were protecting any sources or methods, and we are confident that we are. None of that work has been done on this new memo that no one has yet read, but the Republicans voted to allow the rest of the members to read it so that it can go through that process.
But why not hold back?
You've asked enough.
So not clearly saying exactly why they decided not to move forward with hold back on the Republican release at the same time as the Democratic memo, but saying it was all part of this process. But the thing about this process, Brianna, is this is the first time in the committee's roughly 40-year existence that this rule has been used to declassify this memo, declassify intelligence, and give the president an opportunity to decide whether or not to release it to the public. So there's really no novel, there's no common practice here. It was a decision by the Republicans to let this out first and not let the Democratic memo come out at the same time. And that was a decision that they made. They say it was completely within bounds, their decision to move forward. He also tried to make clear, Brianna, that this is not anything to do with the Mueller investigation. He tried to keep this separate from Robert Mueller's special counsel investigation. But a lot of Republicans don't see it the same way. They're trying to tie the two together to undercut what's happening with the special counsel's investigation, Brianna.
And what was that? What did he say? You've asked enough?
You've asked enough. That was his response.
Oh, I might steal that. Although, never enough, Manu Raju. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Brianna.
All right, I want to bring in my panel now. We have CNN political analyst and Washington bureau chief for the Daily Beast, Jackie Kucinich, and we have former federal prosecutor and criminal defense attorney Seth Waxman. He's with the Dickinson Wright law firm. Also, we have CNN legal and national security analyst Asha Rangappa with us. She's also a former FBI special agent and is now a lecturer at Yale. Jackie, one of the things that makes it hard to separate politics from this Nunes memo at all is when you think about who Devin Nunes is and his role. He was on the Trump transition team. Mm-hmm. He has acted at times so much in the interest of the White House as he did this last March.
I have seen intelligence reports that clearly show that the president-elect and his team were, I guess, at least monitored and disseminated out in intelligence and what appears to be raw, or I shouldn't say raw, but intelligence reporting channels. I'm not comfortable with it, and I want to make sure that the White House understands it.
Now, it turns out that he was able to see those intelligence reports because he was summoned to the White House in a very weird, sort of secretive way that he went to the White House to view these reports. The Ethics Committee ended up investigating him, which is why at the time he temporarily stepped aside from doing Russia things, although that he was cleared of any wrongdoing. But suffice to say, he's not objective. He's not an objective party here.
Especially when you're talking to Democrats. Democrats have painted him now as not an honest broker on this. When you see Adam Schiff, who's the ranking member on that committee, they don't get along anymore, which is odd. For the Intelligence Committee, back in the day, before all of this, they used to. It used to be one of the few committees where partisanship was kind of set aside in the interest of national security. It seems like sepia-toned and quaint right now. But as a result of Nunes being involved with this, some of his interactions with the White House that you mentioned, he's now kind of a figurehead for the Republicans who are trying to derail the Russia investigation and make it more about the DOJ and the FBI than about the Kremlin.
And Asha, one of the things that Democrats are saying, one of the reasons for why this shouldn't be released is they say this is just unprecedented for something, for classified information like this to be released this way. Is that true?
Well, there's a reason that FISAs are top secret. Just to zoom back, the FISA process is essentially the foreign intelligence analog to the criminal wiretap procedure. These are basically very similar, but the FISA process is secret because there are very sensitive methods and sources. These could include human sources who, if they're exposed, literally could be killed. They could include electronic sources that, if they're uncovered, could dry up the intelligence that the FBI or even the CIA and NSA are getting and could compromise other ongoing investigations. So, you know, Congress should definitely exercise its oversight function, but there are channels to report abuse. The Office of the Inspector General, for example, there can be internal audits, but putting this out into the public has severe consequences, not least that it allows Russia to see what state of the investigation, what the state of our investigation is against them, and be able to take countermeasures to avoid detection in the future. And we know that they are preparing to interfere again in our election, so that is not good for America.
Seth, I want to ask you about the FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe. We figured he was going in March, but now we know that he's going earlier. So this was pretty sudden. The White House says, look, the president had nothing to do with this, but we know that he has attacked Andrew McCabe over and over. We know the special counsel is looking at obstruction of justice. Is this anything that could be a part of that?
Sure, I don't know that his actual stepping down just yesterday could be, an overt act or an act that's, directly evidence of obstruction, but clearly the acts leading up to that, the constant badgering, fitting into that pattern of dismissing Comey, of telling Jeff Sessions, don't recuse yourself, you need to stay here to protect me, and then the attacks on Andrew McCabe. So I think it fits that pattern in practice that the special prosecutor will be looking at.
So it would be one data point maybe, or it would speak to, or would really the way the president has behaved when it comes to tweeting and attacking McCabe really be the bigger issue than him stepping down?
Well, I think you're right on that point, but I think the way a prosecutor looks at this is it's got to be proven circumstantially. You have to prove corrupt intent for an obstruction case. And while we would like to get into the mind of Donald Trump, and sometimes we see, inroads into that through his tweets, I mean, at the end of the day, the prosecutor's got to build his case circumstantially, and that's the way prosecutors think. They think of patterns, practices, how you can show over a period of time that step after step after step all points in one direction. Andrew McCabe's attacks on him would fit into that as a piece of the puzzle, and at the end of the day, you'd put it all together and submit it either to a jury or potentially, if there's impeachment in this case, to Congress.
I wonder, Asha, what is the effect here on the FBI's rank and file when you're talking about McCabe leaving and then Republicans accusing the FBI of abusing power?
Right. I think that it will have a significant effect on morale. This is an agency that has 35,000 people, 14,000 agents. When you have a career agent like Andrew McCabe, that's something that's typically celebrated within the FBI. It's a huge achievement. Somebody usually leaves with a big party and speeches. They don't leave at lunchtime never to be seen again. And I think the unceremonious way in which he left and in which Comey left, they see themselves as a family, and it would be a affront to the family. It's becoming like The Apprentice, where someone leaves abruptly and gets sent home in a limo. But I think that, it's sending a bad message also. It's the president and now Congress saying, if you conduct an investigation that we don't like, we will accuse you of misconduct, we will investigate you, we will smear you in public, to kind of use the Harvey Weinstein words, we'll make sure you never work in this town again. And I think that's really what's being heard, and it's a really dangerous precedent to be setting for what should be an independent law enforcement agency.
There's been this question of whether the president is going to talk to Robert Mueller. I want you to listen, Jackie, to what Chris Christie said about this very thing.
I don't think there's been any allegations, credible allegations against the President of the United States. And I don't think the President of the United States, unless there are credible allegations, which I don't believe there are, should be sitting across from a special counsel. The presidency is different. I don't think they should do that.
Trump said he'd love to sit down. Christie is saying something different. Do you think that, could you see a situation where Trump doesn't sit down with Mueller?
Here's the thing about Chris Christie. If Chris Christie was Bob Mueller, Chris Christie used to do this, right? He was an AG. There's no way he wouldn't try to interview the president. That wouldn't happen. So is Chris Christie trying to talk through the TV to the president? Perhaps. But, at this moment, the president has signaled that he's going to. Who knows what he'll say tomorrow, though, because it has gone back and forth.
Jackie, Seth, Asha, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And coming up, the Trump administration faced a key deadline to release sanctions on Russia last night for meddling in the 2016 election. They did not release sanctions. And what they did unveil is raising some serious eyebrows. We'll explain. Plus, First Lady Melania Trump expected to attend the State of the Union tonight, and it comes amid a new report that says she was furious to learn President Trump's lawyer reportedly paid a porn star to keep quiet about an alleged affair. We'll have details on that ahead.
Aaron Burnett out front. Stories that matter.
You've got the money and you've got the passion, but how do you actually make a difference?
From the people making headlines
Did you and Donald Trump talk about his Muslim plan?
To wherever news breaks, Aaron is there, one-on-one, in the field, and around the globe.
What makes you believe you can accomplish that sort of growth?
Aaron Burnett out front.